Well, we are live of Heismans and Grammys. Justin Giandgrande, I'm Chuck Walton. Welcome.
You know, I've always kind of had this history of just spotting opportunities. I did some stuff in the gaming space in 2020.
I want to jump in on that. So, you have a unique ability. You're like the guy, like myself. I always say I'm like the guy that's just always around the football when it's fumbled. I think you do a good job of identifying who's next. We talk about that a lot with Malachi, with Julian. I think you see past just them on the field. We look at what they can be off the field, right? What was it about Tim when you were back in Florida where you were like, this is the guy? And how did you cultivate and maintain that relationship with Tim Tebow?
Well, the interesting thing with Tim is that the maturity for an 18-year-old, right? I just described this environment we're stepping into. National championships, parties. He was just laser focused, on the task. And the task was winning and leading a team. Even at like 18, I think it's amazing to have all that. That's how you spot the great ones. The ones that have all the fanfare, have all the reason to go off the tracks. But they're just like focused on they feel like they've accomplished nothing.
Nothing, right.
And I mean, we're looking at that Florida Gators documentary. How the fuck did this guy hold it together for them to win 2 national championships? Like, how?
It was a lot going on.
By the way, you heard Cam Newton's interview the other day, right?
I saw.
He's like, I don't know. I don't know how they did it.
He actually he gave Tim a lot of praise too. He was like, that was crazy environment.
I could tell you stories of Tim just literally holding it together, and he did. And because if you really listen to Cam's interview, he basically is saying, like, we really had no business with as much shit that was going on. We should have never won any. Like, it's just crazy.
Especially in the SEC, right? I mean, the competition level is crazy.
But spotting talent, I mean, it's 2 things. Spotting talent and new opportunities, right? Like,
What does spotting talent look like to you, right? Everybody, especially in LA, everybody out here, the weather's perfect. You can play baseball year round, and sports is great. Everybody's bringing their kids to TNA. They want you to, what I mean?
Chuck's been pitching me his kid he doesn't even have yet.
I know. I'm like, I need a son. Shout out to my daughter Gia, but I was like, Gia. My son's coming to TNA. But how do you spot that kid and you go, okay, he's a top 50 guy, but what makes him a TNA guy?
We look it through
or girl.
Yeah,
rather.
We look it through a marketing lens. When I constructed the roster, both hip hop talent and now the NIL talent, I want to know when we walk in a room with a brand or a company that there's someone defined on what their demo is, that they're a great fit, and personalities. I think sometimes management companies and agencies go so big, they sign clients, put them on a roster, and they just hope it's going to fit.
Right.
For us, it's like, if I go into a room with Pepsi, or I go into a room with Manscaped, or I go into a room with Loops Beauty, I know which my clients on the roster make sense. We keep it small and tight. Yeah. We of course do some endorsement deals and things with people at times if it makes sense, just bringing them opportunities. But the term actually managing the client, it really is on an intimate level, if that makes sense. And my thought is if you really can sign talent and help them actually build their brand, and by the way, sometimes they won't work out, but sometimes they will. And if you really give that attention to detail. As far as spotting talent, it's just watching how certain talent moves, or they have a certain unique selling value from a marketing standpoint. I think that's it. It's do they kind of fit different? When you talk about them to people, does it just resonate a little different?
Yeah, I mean,
and not every talent though is marketable, even if they're a really good athlete. And I think that's something people fall, just because there's lots of athletes I passed on that are just good athletes, but
they're not marketable.
They're not a brand. We look at through the lens, is this person 5 years from now, are they Serena Williams? Do they have that type of capabilities?
No, I mean, that's a great point. I think that's a great segue into the NIL conversation, right? We were talking to one of the producers offline, and he asked me, he said, well, how do you know what guy and what sport is the best athlete to work with? And I said, well, it's funny. I said, you got the baseball guys who make all the money, on their contract, right?
Chuck can't name 2 of them right now.
Mookie Betts and Ohtani.
Well, that's impressive.
Shout out to the Dodgers. And whoever's on my White Sox. We're just terrible right now. But you got the baseball guy who gets all the money. You've got the basketball guys who get the money and they get the visibility.
Yep.
Then you get the football guy who doesn't have a guaranteed contract. He's making cool money until he, God forbid, tears an ACL, but he also wears a helmet so people don't know who he is, and he doesn't understand why he has to do this marketing thing, right? in the NIL space, everybody thinks they deserve to make money. And the valuations on these players, like you go to on3.com, right? They've got the actual, like this guy's worth like, $300K, right? For like, can you break down how do they come up with that evaluation? And also, where is NIL going in the sense of how they do the pay structure? Because every kid now, I think like the last 5 number 1 picks or something were all transfer quarterbacks, right? So we're dealing with it with Malachi, right? Malachi, 5-star number 1 player.
Yeah.
He transferred, and we know Malachi is going to ball out.
He's good. So you don't know if 5 stars, right?
Yeah, and we know Malachi is going to do his thing.
That's actually why he transferred. He knew the only way to be a number 1 pick was to transfer. That's good.
I know. I mean, right? Shout out to man. I love Malachi. That's my bro, and he's going to do his thing, right? Yeah. But there's probably a brand that might look at that like, oh well, why would I do a deal with the Malachi? Because now he's a transfer. Kind of break down like that process, what that looks like. For a kid in his position.
Well, a couple things. One, the ranking online, you have to go deep inside the On3 territory. I think, candidly, they probably launched that product initially just like, dude, we got to stake a claim. I don't know how we're going to figure this out, but we're just going to say this is the ranking.
Right.
You put people on a list, and they automatically love it. And they always want to be number 1, so shout out to them. How do we look about the transfer portal and just all of it? I mean, initially, so let me tell you how I got into the NIL space. I got in because, had the opportunity to do some advising with Bryce Young and Craig Young, got introduced to them, to Malachi and his father in 2021, guys. Like, for all of you that don't know, 2021, wow. The rules changed in NIL July 1st. And I was the crazy person, emailing brands saying, guys, NIL's coming. And they're like, so
you told me 2019 it was coming.
Yeah, they're like, so what? And so 2021 the rules change. I'll never forget where I was. I was in Vegas for a convention, July 21st. I do a Zoom with Malachi and his father, and Malachi's about to commit to Oklahoma. And his father had the wherewithal. Eric Nelson, it's my brother. I'm super proud of him. Had the wherewithal to say, like, college NIL exists. Like, what's the deal with high school NIL? And I'm like, great question, Eric Nelson. I don't know, but I'll go find out the answer. So I went with an attorney to the CIF, California High School Federation, and Interscholastic Federation. And I'm thinking they're going to tell me 5 years for high school NIL, 2 years, never come back again. They come back about an hour later, say, we look at the bylaws, and it's legal here in the state of California. We mirror college. And I call Eric back. I'm like, Eric, here's the deal. You're never going to believe this. It's legal. So I ended up signing Malachi. And he announced for Oklahoma. We didn't actually do an endorsement deal because we were like, okay, 1 week. And it was almost one of those questions I think Eric was asking for the sake of asking, thinking it was going to be a no. And then when you get the yes, you're like, you ever get that, guys? Like, you get a yes, and you're like, oh, okay, well, I'm not actually prepared to do what I was talking about. So,
I was kidding. I was just joking.
Yeah, I was just kidding, guys. Cool. So, Malachi commits, and, I've been on this journey with him and his family ever since. I'll be at Boise this weekend.
Yep.
I mean, Malachi and his dad, I mean, I guess I'm a part of it, but they really paved the way, and I don't think they get enough credit for that. The journey, it's the truth. We've been on an unbelievable up and down journey with this thing, and I wouldn't have it any other way. That's the way we are with our clients, like thick and thin with this thing, especially the NIL space. So Malachi commits to going to Oklahoma. Well, wouldn't you know, in the NIL world, Oklahoma State beats Oklahoma. The next day, Lincoln Riley is now going to USC. So wow. This is 2022. So Malachi is the number 1 player in the nation. He decommits from Oklahoma, goes to USC. And, been on that journey with him, taking him through that process, being a part of it. And now, for a lot of reasons, he's now at Boise State. Spring games this fall. And I think one of those things that kind of plays into it is like, and this is kind of just something for all players, like, as you guys have probably seen, Chuck, like, playing time really matters. It's kind of turned into pro football where, playing, they call this, there's this term called go small, play big, where like you go to a smaller school and you get your playing time and then you elevate. It's basically a free agency all the time. I don't know who had the idea to changing the transfer rules the same time NIL was created, but y'all crazy.
It's nuts.
Y'all crazy.
It's nuts.